The Journeymen are back in business here again, coming at you live, fresh off our little chat with the Cooligans, which was a really good time. We talked a little bit about those dudes, meeting them in Chicago for the first time when Gordo and I were talking. We were talking MLS content and MLS All-Star Game when Real Madrid was there, but we got through some good content. We got through a good game. Dax, you were in attendance, I believe, and maybe in a different capacity than Gordo and I were. But Dax McCarty, Alan Gordon, Dan Gargan joining you again for Major League Journeymen. If you haven't checked out that episode with the Cooligans, it was really funny. Those dudes are absolutely hysterical, both of them.
Dude, they've come a long way. I gotta say, they've come a long way, man. They were sending me when they were just grinding, probably doing stand up in front of a couple hundred people. They sent me a fruit bowl for a wedding gift for Jen and I, and they've kind of used that as an ongoing bit for years now, and it's always a fun topic of conversation when it comes up. But to see how much success those guys have had, obviously, like, very big influence now in American soccer, with both of them, pretty prominent in the media scene. It's cool to see, man. And it was a good collab and it was fun. It was a good episode. It's the video, I think, is on their YouTube channel. I think we're going to try to post the audio here in a little bit on ours just for some fun and if people missed it, but definitely check it out if you can.
Hey, so those guys just sent me a couple clips like they did you guys. They put it on my Instagram. And every now and again, do you have somebody that texts you or sends you something from 3 years ago and you never responded? I looked, they send it to me.
That never happens to me, Gordo, because I'm a good person and I just respond to my friends.
So it's just me. So back when I was sleeping on Dax's couch in 2018, after we saw him at the All-Star Game, I see this big paragraph. It's like, hey, nice to meet you at the game. We'd love to have you on. Just hit us up. And crickets for, what's that been, 5 years?
So you big time them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I didn't mean to.
No wonder they were complete dicks to you on the episode.
They were. I was like, well, I feel like a dick. I swear I didn't remember this. They're like, yeah. You were still playing back then, and now you're nobody. So
you thought you were super cool back then. Now we know the truth. You're not. That was hilarious. They are both very funny individuals and they have had a ton of success. You are spot on with that, Dax. Alexi, geez, that dude thinks he's like the president of the United States right now. It was comical to go through that. But good for them. They deserve it. They're crushing it. The MLS playoffs have begun though, and we are through the first round. Dax, I'm assuming you've watched 99% of the games, as it's your profession. Gordo, I know you're watching a ton of these games, but from your perspective, Dax, and you've now seen the collection of a season, the first round of playoffs open. We know playoff soccer is different than the regular season. Who is the strongest team in your opinion, bar Orlando, Nashville? Take that out of the picture. It's out of the conversation. Which team surprised you the most and we're like, oh, they're in good form?
It's not even really a surprise, and I think you know which direction I'm going to go with this. Sporting Kansas City, man, the only team to win on the road the first game. Every single home team was victorious in this first round of games in this best of three series, and Sporting Kansas City went on the road and absolutely smacked St. Louis, right? And I got to say, man, it isn't all that surprising to me. And it's not because St. Louis isn't a good team. I think St. Louis is a very good team. But when you're an expansion team, it doesn't matter how much success you've had in the regular season. The playoffs are just a different animal and a different beast. And whether we want to admit it or not, because, we all need to hold our hands up and be like, hey, PV, Peter Vermees, we were kind of skeptical about your job security there in the beginning of the year. And you've basically, whether rightly or wrongly, you basically just dunked on all of us. And your ownership came out and fully supported you, said, we need to get some guys healthy. I think having Pulido back has just been a massive difference for them. Johnny Russell was kind of dealing with a couple injuries here and there. having him back has been a huge benefit to their team. And they're the team, I don't really know what the numbers are, but they've been in the best form for like the last 6 months in MLS.
Second half of the season, best points per game.
So I think a lot of people were probably surprised by that result in St. Louis. I wasn't surprised at all. When Nashville SC went to Kansas City and we beat them 3-0 in Kansas City, it was a little surprising for us on the field because we were like, this is still a good team, but they were a little bit deflated. You were like, I don't know if this team is going to have enough to make the playoffs. But once they got in the playoffs, I knew they were going to be dangerous. And I knew that was a bad matchup for St. Louis because St. Louis kind of handled their business in the regular season. They smacked them a couple times.
Beat them 4-0 at the end of the season.
So, look, it is hard to beat a team consistently in the regular season and then go and play them in the playoffs and not expect a different, outcome. So, hats off to Kansas City. Definitely the team of the first round of games of the playoffs. I think FC Cincinnati was very impressive too, even though Red Bull was on short rest. Supporter Shield, you could have a letdown. I thought Cincinnati was very good against Red Bull as well.
Yeah, so I was at that game. It was a 9:25 start on a Sunday night in.
You were at the St. Louis game. Yeah,
in the St. Louis game.
25.
9:25. So they put the late game in St. Louis. The early game was Houston RSL, which is the same time zone because it was in Houston, but you had a Western Conference. I don't know. It didn't really quite add up, but it was late. I didn't get home, I think, until like 1 o'clock maybe. It was a long evening on a Sunday night. But the atmosphere was electric.
It was still good.
For 25 minutes. And then it was like a church. And I mean, it was pretty wild. The opening, and I've told you guys about this, the environment was pouring rain. Not a seat in the stadium was empty. Everybody was on it. Everybody was gassed up. Everybody was going nuts. Their whole like pregame stuff is next level. They got like the lasers going. They turned the whole stadium red. It's pretty powerful. And then Sporting came out and just obliterated them. And you thought Timmy Parker scored one to tie it up, and you were like, okay, maybe they got lucky here with like a 25-minute reemergence or whatever. It took them to get kind of acclimated to the pace to playoff soccer. And then Sporting came down and scored again, and the game was over, and everybody knew it.
By the way, bangers. Every goal for Sporting. Sick.
Well, they're sharp. They looked sharp. They looked faster. St. Louis looked flat. They were slow. They were disengaged. Like you could tell that there were a lot of issues that were bubbling up on the St. Louis side. But, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but like the schedule didn't really do St. Louis too many favors either. They were off for a long while. There was games in between for Sporting. Sporting came in fresh and healthy, and St. Louis is healthy too, but they looked the second-rate team by a long margin. Gordo, who did you see? Who do you like right now? If you had to pick another seed, you're not going to take Sporting as your number one seed. Who do you like coming out of these?
I'll add to that a little bit, but I was surprised by that. I was surprised by their performance because if you watch the game,
Sporting's performance or St. Louis?
No, I mean both, right? I think it was both. I think it was a letdown on St. Louis's part. They didn't look up for it. Kansas City, that's the best that I've seen them play. I watched them play against San Jose in the knockout game, and they didn't look good.
Yeah.
They didn't look good at all. They looked flat. They couldn't score. They weren't dangerous. Yeah. And they get lucky because Tim Mealy is an absolute monster on PKs.
They went to PKs
where they're going
at home.
He knows where they're going before they do.
I think isn't he undefeated in PKs, 7-0?
Is he?
I think I saw that on the broadcast.
Yes.
That is a very, very beneficial, dangerous stat for other teams playing Kansas City.
Yeah.
Especially first round, all games ending in PKs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was really surprised because I was like, okay, this is kind of the Kansas City that, and I didn't know that they were the hottest team. But I mean, to Dax's point, you got to give credit where credit's due. Peter Vermees gets them there. They get there somehow, some way. They battle back. They stick to their guns. He gets them in the postseason. Now they're off and running. I just got to say, hey, Chris Winger, I know you're going to be listening to this, and I told you, bro. I told you, don't pick the number one seed, dude. Or did you, Dax? He picks.
Wait, does Wingard have them or do I? I think I have them.
I don't know. Well, one of them. I told you.
No, he took Cincinnati. I took St. Louis.
Don't pick the number one seed. You're going to
Don't pick
get
the number one. Yeah, I'm helping your argument. Cincinnati is not
Right.
helping your argument because they obliterated Red Bull. Did you watch that game?
Yeah, I did. But I'm going to go with a common team here, a common theme. Dax has been all over him. He's been on the field with him, and he said it first, right? And ever since Dax, basically put Seattle on my map, because we talked about them a lot, dude. They are really impressive, right? They really are impressive, and now they got, they got guys coming off the bench that were MVPs, or goal scoring champions. And when you do that, Morris, you can move around. They got pieces that they can really, they got a lot of arsenal, a good arsenal going, and they're going to be really tough to beat.
And by the way, let's not beat around the fact that FC Dallas just lost their best player to an ACL, and he's done for the season.
I was gonna say that was a lot. I'm not buying stock in Dallas even before that happened. I wasn't a big fan of them during the regular season. I didn't think that they were a great team, and I thought that. I still question Seattle's attack. Something about it just looks somewhat off. And I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but it doesn't look as fluid as maybe it has in the past. And it's a good thing that it is.
I know what it is. It's so much of their success in the past couple seasons has come through Rui Diaz and Ladero. And Brian Schmetzer is very clearly sending a signal that, they are no longer first choice, even though they're still great players. They're just a little bit older, which I shouldn't be saying.
He's not going to be there next year.
Right. And you have to think that's having an effect a little bit on his morale, his mentality. I mean,
Schmetzer,
I think he's
or Ladero?
Ladero. I think Ladero is a top pro, but I do think that you can't help but be a little bit frustrated, a little bit sad that you're not going back to Seattle after a team that you basically put on your shoulders for 6-7 years straight. You've brought an MLS Cup to them. You've brought an international competition. They won CONCACAF Champions Cup, first MLS team ever to do it. It's got to be a little bit of a letdown for him. And now Schmetzer is sending a very clear message that, hey, I think my strongest team is with you on the bench. At least that was what he did in their first leg against Dallas. I'm sure Ladero will have
brought him on though for the last 30.
Well, he's still going to have a part to play, but just to your point about their attack not being as fluid. Yeah. When everything goes through Ladero for 4, 6, 7 years, however long it's been, there's going to be an adjustment period, right? And to I think Seattle's calling card now is, along with us in Nashville, they have the best defense in the league. And Stephen Fry was robbed of not being a part of the MLS Goalkeeper of the Year conversation, led the league in shutouts. Yamar and Jackson Reagan have emerged, in my opinion, as one of the better center back duos in the league. And you just have a very good balance between the back line and the midfield with João Paulo, and Christian Roldan is healthy now. He's so key to them. And so like what Gordo was saying,
he's a beast, huh?
Christian Roldan is the perfect player to balance your team out, right? If you need to play him in the middle, you can play him in the middle. If you need to play him as a winger, you can play him as a winger, because tactically he is so good. And that's what I really liked about how Seattle played, and how they're very fluid in terms of how they get the ball into their attack. But I agree with you, Gargs. I think something does look a little bit off about their attack. Jordan Morris is a very versatile player, and he did score a great striker's goal. But I think his best position is out on the wing. I think in order for Seattle to be at their best, I think you need Rui Diaz on the field. So Leo Chu has been great, and Christian Roldan's been great as a right midfielder. So to me, I look at Schmetzer, and he's got champagne problems right now in terms of his players, who he can play. But to Gordo's point, they do look very deep right now because they are healthy. And so I think they're going to be a tough out in the West.
Does LAFC's result over Vancouver surprise you, or is it what we should expect every game they play in the playoffs right now?
Gordo?
Yeah, dude.
So for context, Bouanga obviously crushes it again, wins the Golden Boot, and then they go and put 5 on Vancouver at home.
Hey, as far as I'm concerned, I'm thinking watch out for LAFC. I think that they hit a point in the year where they had an identity crisis, right? It was the passing of the torch from
Vela.
Villa, it's from Vela to Bouanga, and there was some tension there. I think, I think that Vela was still trying to hold on to it. Bouanga clearly had one goal in mind, and that was going to be to win the Golden Boot. I think, and then they did make. They did make the Champions League final. They did all these things. They weren't able to get the hardware that they may or may not have deserved. So everybody's thinking as them as a failure and a failed season. I disagree. They went through this kind of lull. They weren't getting the results. I think they might be getting hot at the right time. And I think they might have found their identity and said, you know what? This guy is going to score for us, and we're going to let him score. And Bella's going to play his role. I think they may be, having this perfect chemistry at the right time. And that's just my feeling, because they looked great. Hollandsted's getting goals. He's a super dangerous player. They're allowing him to get forward. So I'm just saying, this team, I think a lot of people have slept on them because they haven't been able to win the big game going into this. But I think that this is exactly what they needed is for the expectations to go down just a little bit, forget about them just a little bit, and they're going to slap you in the face.
Gordo, quick trivia question for you, buddy. How many goals that LAFC scored out of 5 were scored on set pieces in that game?
Well, I know Hollandstead had 2, and then a kind of a ricochet. Bouanga 3. I'll say 3.
The answer is 4. Okay,
4.
They scored 4 goals on set pieces. So I agree with you. I think that LAFC, in terms of overall talent, in terms of good coaching, I think they're a great team. I think they're a dangerous team. I'm not ready to buy them just yet because of this result at home against Vancouver. I think it speaks.
I was going to ask you.
I think it just hold on. I think it speaks more. I just agreed with you. I think LAFC is dangerous, but I think that game in particular speaks more to Vancouver's absolute frailty and weakness on set pieces, because Vancouver had set piece issues all throughout the season. I think they can see the most goals on set pieces all year. So I'm agreeing with you that they are a very dangerous team, and it does seem like they're getting hot at the right time. But I'm not willing to put them ahead of a team like Seattle right now in terms of who I think is the strongest in the Western Conference, because I still think that if Vancouver, by some miracle, because obviously they've been bad at it all year, if they can get their set piece situation right, they actually played not terribly in between the 18s. And I know that you can't completely discount set pieces, but to me, that's more of a problem for Vancouver to solve. And if they can solve that problem, I still think that they have a good chance in this series against LAFC. I think they're going to win that return leg in Vancouver. And then I think anything can happen in that third game. But you're not wrong. I do think they have the most informed player in the league right now, as well as a very strong coach, a very strong midfield. Like, I'm not disagreeing with you by any means. I just think I'm not ready to sit there after they smash Vancouver at home, scoring 4 set pieces. I'm not ready to say that Vancouver's completely out of it just yet. They would be out of it if goal difference and if aggregate was involved here, which I guess that's a totally topic of different conversation. But I think I think Vancouver is going to hopefully correct some issues they had on set pieces, and they're going to give a much better account of themselves in Vancouver.
Does it concerned me a little bit that LAFC, just speaking to them, they were the only home team that gave up 2 goals, and they probably could have given up a few more to Vancouver. And Vancouver is decent, but I don't think anybody's convinced that Vancouver is a world beater, and they're the only ones that went into the opposing stadium and scored a couple goals and created real chances. I thought Columbus was pretty good. Did you guys watch that game?
I didn't get to see the Columbus game, unfortunately.
So we I think went back and forth on this one when we did our draft. And is Columbus for real? Like, they're a team that has such a nice style and they play this beautiful game, but does it really translate to the playoffs? And they carved open Atlanta, and Atlanta's got they have their own issues. I think they're a bit of a fraud. They also were out without Almada, which is a massive piece. But I think that they can probably deal with Almada. But Cucho is a killer. Yeah. And for me, that's maybe the difference maker in their style versus the execution in the playoffs, because he scores goals and he he eats, man. He is fun to watch, and he's been fun to watch all season, but he performed again. And I like him. I like him a lot. He's going to be a star in this league.
Every team that we played against in the league, obviously Cincinnati, their front three attacking players are very dangerous. Columbus's front attacking three, whether you want to put Christian Ramirez in there, Matan, Cucho, and Diego Rossi. I thought losing Zelarayan might have been a problem. It hasn't been a problem at all. And I think Cucho has actually gotten better since Zelarayan has left. But their front three, the way that they combine, I didn't see the game at all, but it doesn't surprise me that Cucho scored two. I'm sure there were more chances in the game for their other attacking players. They are an absolute handful and very difficult to deal with. And they are a little fragile defensively. I think that they open themselves up a ton, and that's why they're so fun to watch. It's a pain in the ass to play against, but their front three, man, they are so dangerous. And when you have a guy that's getting hot at the right time, I said Bouanga is probably the most informed player, attacking player in the league right now. Cucho's not far behind him, if at all. I think they're probably 1A and 1B right now as far as who is in a better vein of form. But yeah, Columbus, it doesn't surprise me they won the game. Atlanta, without Almada, I looked at kind of how they set up. I looked at the lineups. I wasn't able to watch the game, but it seemed like they played with five in the back. It seemed like they were trying to basically counteract what Columbus was trying to do going forward. And it didn't work. So, I think with Almada coming back, Atlanta will obviously be much better, but Columbus, man, they're a good team. It doesn't surprise me they won the game.
Dax, let's pivot a little bit and chat about the Orlando matchup and kind of where your thoughts lied after game one.
Yeah, difficult game. I thought we started the game not in the best vein of form. I thought we were a little bit hesitant, a little bit confused, and I think that's credit to Orlando because they're a good team, man. If we want to talk about teams that are actually in the best form along with Kansas City, I think it was Orlando that had the most points, let's call it, for the last 6 months of the year. And so we knew it was going to be a challenge, especially down in Orlando. They're a good team. With that being said, the way that the game went and played out, we did have the best chance of the game before Cartagena scored an absolute worldie, which
that was a
full
strike,
credit to him. What a strike. Unsavable. We grew into the game. And I thought that the margins in the playoffs, this is exactly what we know going into it as a veteran team. The margins in the playoffs are really, really thin. And if we are on the road and we're taking on a little bit of pressure, if we can take advantage of the 1, 2, 3 chances that we can get going forward on the other side of it, then it's a totally different game. And that's where in the second half, I think we tried and we put a little bit more pressure on them, but not enough on their goal, right? We didn't put enough efforts on target. We didn't test Gallese enough. And you know what? I still think in the mood after the game was one of disappointment, but still confident, right? Because I think it's a very even matchup with Orlando. I don't think there's a lot between the teams. And now, look, I think it's great for us because now our backs are against the wall. We're back into Leagues Cup, baby. Win or you're done, right? And I love the mood of our team right now. I love the confidence of our team right now. We're not happy that we lost game one, but I'm backing us 100% to come out and to play well and to hopefully bring that tie back to Orlando because I know that we have the quality and the confidence in our group right now to be able to do that.
And you guys, are you a next week game, a weekend game?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. Oh yeah, that sounds obvious. Why
really weird. Really strange. Monday game, then Tuesday.
At Geodis.
Yeah, at Geodis. What did you guys think? You guys watched the game. Obviously, I'm curious your guys' thoughts.
Yeah,
Bordeaux?
I would back you on that. I thought you guys, started on your heels a little bit.
Yeah.
But they were flying, dude.
They were flying. They were buzzing, man. They were buzzing. The energy in the crowd was great. I think Orlando's another one of those super underrated atmospheres that when they get that stadium full, man, it's loud.
I'm not sure yet about McGuire. He didn't really sell me on that performance, on that game. He didn't really have a lot, but I'll tell you what, this I'll try these names. The 77, Analo, right? Angulo.
I'll try these names.
The sad part is that's an easy one. You just pronounce
There's
it.
There's no G. Well, I'm reading some. It says Analo. The Perivria guy. And then the Torres guy.
Pereira?
Huh?
Pereira.
Pereira?
I'm telling you how to pronounce it.
There's a V. There's no V. There's a V in his name.
No, it's a Y.
Oh, so
what website are you on? Are you on soccer?
So those top three. So those top three were flying. They were really good, putting you guys into some positions. For me, like if I'm going to be honest about your team and your offense, and I know you guys are in Orlando, what I'm missing is I want Hani to get higher up the field. I don't think he's useful back there. He wants to touch the ball, and I get it, and he can do it all. He can make those little combos in the middle, but he needs to find himself in pockets, breaking lines, so he can do his thing. And that's where, when you guys were hot in Leagues Cup, I remember how many times did we see Dax in the box, dude? When you guys were flying, Dax, you were getting forward. There was just a fluidity amongst you guys, and the spacing was so much better. Okay, with Godoy and Davis, I feel like they're both really more defensive minded. And listen, you're a 6 as well, but I think that you morphed into
in your heart, you're not a 6.
Into that Zimmerman 10, right? And I'm not saying you morphed into like you were an 8. Okay, you were an 8. Right now, I think you're playing with 2 6s and an 8 and a 9. Right?
Let me,
10.
Let me double down on this.
I don't think you're wrong,
before you
Gordo.
go, Dax.
Yeah, go. Yeah.
Because I think that there's a big piece of this that is not to take away from Sturridge and what he adds to the group, but I think he's a much bigger presence than what you had up there before, and I think it limits Mukhtar's maybe just confidence in getting into that, because when you played with Bunbury up there, Teal's been all over the field, right? He plays as a winger. He's come underneath. He plays the 0.9. I felt like there was more lanes, whereas I don't think Sturridge really opens up as much space for either Hani or you or anybody else to get into that area.
I think all of our attacking players are very unique in like the different qualities that they bring. And I actually really like the differences between all of those guys because we are really versatile in terms of like what we can do. I think Sam is actually a great player and he's a great finisher and he needs to be in and around the box. And I think Hani's kind of the same, right? Hani's a great finisher. And I think it's just about finding the right balance between Hani coming and helping us build out of the back when we want to have more possession, but also getting him higher up the field and closer to goal, right? Because we've seen with all those guys, all of our attacking players, when they're closer to goal and when we're able to, we're not really a team that is going to like be like Man City and like methodically break you down with like 100 passes around the box, right? That's just not where our strength lies. I think our strength lies in transition when we can get our attacking players running to goal at speed, right? And so if we can find more moments where we're able to do that, whoever's on the field, right? Whether it's Fafa Pico or Schaffelberg or Teal or Sam or Hani or Alex Muil, any of those guys have strengths to do that. I think that we need to make sure that in transition, when we win the ball back, we go, right? We don't go backwards. We don't play back to the keeper or whatever it is. We just need to find a little bit better balance of like managing that, because I do think our attacking players are dangerous players and they've proven that. They've shown that, all of them. And so, yeah, I think in Orlando, obviously, like the way the game went, Orlando sat a little bit deeper in the second half, so there wasn't as much space. I think that we're going to find chances. I really do. And I think that our attacking players are just waiting to explode. And so I'm excited about the game on Tuesday, man. I think we have a lot of confidence in our group, like I was saying. I think it's just a matter of getting that first goal. I think when we score the first goal, we're so good and we're so hard to beat. I think when we can see early.
Yeah, and you get your stadium behind you.
Yeah,
too.
you get your stadium behind you. Like I feel like that first goal is so important, and that's something that we should really focus on, is like super aggressive from the beginning. Make sure that we get our fans behind us, because our fans have been fantastic all season. And we know Geodis can be a fortress if they're into it and they're behind us. And so, no matter who steps on the field for us, I'm fully confident that we're going to get the job done on Tuesday.
I'll give you one comment from my opinion on Orlando, and it's Pereira. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the league. That
he's fantastic.
Really any love, and he is excellent. I would take him on my team 8 days out of 7.
He's just a good soccer player. He's got a good feel for the game. He doesn't make any bad decisions. Yeah.
Great awareness.
They're like, to Gordo's point,
that's
they're attacking front four, and Maguire is really kind of just their target man, Gordo. So, I mean, look, when he's playing against Walker Zimmerman and Jack Mayer and Lucas McNaughton, like, it's tough for him, right? Because they're good players. But
I think him and your boy Sam, your number 9, the 2 number 9s had a similar day. You know, they were well defended, and they didn't have much impact on the game, which is just fine. What that just makes it, you know, that's what my point was. The 3 guys that stood out was that 70. I won't try it again. 77, 10, and 17. They were getting the ball in really good spots, better spots than your game makers were getting it. And Hani is, in my opinion, he's the top one. He's the top player in that category, and he just wasn't getting the looks that those guys were. And I completely agree with you. There's got to be something. You got to find some balance. But I have no doubt. I think that you guys are much better at home. I think that it's going to be a different game, and I hope that you guys start on the front foot. And you would hope that too. And I think that if you do, and just take a handle of the game early, I think that you can. Mukhtar's going to find his spots. Sam's got to. You know, I think that's a good point that Dan made that I didn't really point out, but. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to watch it for sure.
Yeah,
it's a good
we're ready
matchup.
to go, man. Should be a
It's
fun
a good
game.
matchup.
So Dax, you weren't a part of the original playoff draft that we did.
I was not.
I don't know, with like 4 games left in the season. So we did draft a couple outliers that didn't quite make it all the way in to the playoffs.
Notably, Dan's pick.
Yours as well, pal. You took Minnesota. But what we did do, I'd be intrigued to hear your opinion. I'm going to give you the teams that are still left for all 3 of us. So Wingert, he had the first draft pick. He's got Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Portland eliminated, Nashville, and Dallas. You got that? Gordo, it's got Seattle, LAFC, Houston, RSL, and New England. Minnesota, gone. Gargs has Columbus, Miami, gone. St. Louis City, Orlando, Vancouver, San Jose, gone. So I have 4 teams left. The other 2 guys have 5 teams left.
Yeah.
Who do you like?
I think Gordo is sitting the prettiest probably out of everybody.
I would tend to agree with you. However, Gordo's going to lose New England. Then he's got
why
3-1, 3-1 Philly.
Who cares? Who cares about aggregate? Who cares about the score?
Nothing. I'm taking Philly as the home team. They did what they needed to do. Home team, Philly. I think, I don't know if they'll get the result in New England, but I see them coming back in Philly and taking care of business. Then he has Houston or RSL, both of them who are playing. So he's going to lose one of those.
True.
So
but I'm coming out.
And then he's got Seattle and LA. So if those things happen, he's got all Western Conference. Wingert, on the other hand, has Cincy, Philly. It'll be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
But you know who's not in it is Gargs.
Gargs is definitely out.
Gargs is not in it.
Gargs has got a big hill to climb.
Big hill to climb.
Oh man, Miami, dude! I thought Miami. I tried to outsmart the draft. I missed that one. How are you feeling about the schedule though? Because we touched on this a little bit. The schedule of the playoffs. I know that there's been some. Lexi Lawless has taken aim at your boy Lovitz, who I think made some comments about including the players in the process. Now there's games kind of all over the place. It doesn't seem like there's a real rhyme or reason to the playoff structure and schedule, which almost feels counter to exactly what Apple and MLS were trying to do with their timing and their schedule for the regular season. And now here we are in the playoffs, the most important games of the year, and we're seemingly all over the shop with these big layoffs in between games. How are you guys feeling in the locker room?
To be honest, I skew towards being negative towards it because it just really doesn't make that much sense to me. Like you've already said, there's no rhyme or reason for it. They preached early on about how they wanted some consistency with the times of the games, and I understand playoffs might be a little bit different. And the one thing I do appreciate about the schedule is that there's no two games that are kicking off at the same time. So like I actually can watch the playoff games, which I like. But the problem is just there's no consistency to it. New England Philly played two days before Nashville Orlando did. And now their second game is going to be 3 days or 2 days after our second game with Orlando.
10 days in between games, right?
So I don't get it. I'm not sure I understand why they made that decision. It just doesn't really make that much sense. But for me, I'm trying to have a one-track mind and just focus on what we can control as players. And I think that's kind of the message in the locker room. It's like, well, who cares about the schedule? Who cares about who we play? Let's just who cares even about the format, right? Which is a whole nother can of worms. Let's just play. Let's control what we can control. Let's step on the field. Let's just try to win the games. Let's win the games. Let's keep advancing. Let's keep gaining momentum and confidence. That's kind of how I've looked at it, right? And so I've just tried to focus on that. I'm sure Gordo will have a lot spicier take than mine.
I mean, Dax, you guys aren't playing until next Tuesday. I mean, this is going to.
If you think about it, Tuesday. It's weird. It's a weird day to play. But it's 8 days. It's 8 days between games. It's really not.
But there's three potentially, and even if you have two, you got to wait a whole nother week, and then it's going to be 2 weeks before you play again.
Right. And there's an international break.
And there's an international break. And to add to that, if any one of these teams that won their first round game win their second round game, the break is in 2.5 weeks.
Yeah. And look, we've talked about the schedule before. There's no easy solution for MLS because they don't want to play through international windows because they don't want teams losing their best players. And I think that's the right way to go about it. But again, it's just there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to how they've scheduled the games out right now.
It just seems so choppy, man. It is. And I thought the only positive that could come out of this, the 3 games, was that teams weren't going to play because in previous years, when you have 2 legs, sometimes it becomes the games aren't great because both teams are playing real safe. One's playing for a tie if you're on the road and you're packing it in. Everybody doesn't want to make a mistake. So I thought the one benefit of this would be that teams would be just throwing it at it. And maybe we're seeing we're seeing scores to actually back that up. We're seeing 4-1. We're seeing some high scoring games, which is fine, but it doesn't seem like that. It still doesn't seem like the aggressive soccer, or that's it's not transpiring for me visually on the field. I think it's still very much the same. And then now it's switched from that to, if you get down 2 goals, especially in this first leg, because all we know is the first leg right now, right? Now it's going to change because, like you said, Dax, it's win or go home for half of these teams. But for the first leg, it was like, if you get down 2-0, who cares? Who cares anymore? It felt like a who cares at the end of a lot of these games. It didn't feel like that intense. We have to score. We have to get back in this game. We have to make a difference because it's like, listen, we'll be back at home next week. No problem. We're just down 1-0. There's no aggregate. So, the whole thing for me, I think, is going to come off a big bust. I don't see them ever trying this again. Just because more so than anything else, there's just no consistency.
I think teams that win the first game handily, I think they are punished the most by this format because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you win the game 10-0 or 1-0.
Oh. So then doesn't that go back to handicapping the better seed?
Right.
That's my point. It doesn't matter. Like Sporting Kansas City right now should be absolutely buzzing and flying. 4 goals on the road, going back home. They should be now, and it's like, okay, great. We had a great performance on the road, but now we go back home and it's a one-off game. St. Louis can win the game 1-0 or even tie the game and go to penalties, and you go to game 3. So there's just a discrepancy there.
Yeah. It's just a tough way to try to get the power back into the hands of the
Dan looks skeptical. He wants to be the contrarian right now.
No, I don't. I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. I think that it wasn't perfect before, but I do think that you devalue goals.
Just the most important thing.
I think you also devalue the position of the regular season. Like you're still devaluing all the work that goes in. And the counter to that is, well, you get the second home game. So you're getting this. But I think it's a business decision. I think it's ultimately
of course it is. They want more games.
They want, and not even just that they want more games, because they could do more games, but they give every team that makes the playoffs a home game. So you get that gate revenue. And I know that some of the owners have been kind of outspoken about that in the past. But if you're going to put all these teams into the playoffs, if nothing else, 7 out of the 8 games went to the higher seed. So the home teams won their game, right? You're going to put all these teams in the playoffs. Why not just expand the format again? Expand it and still play one-off games and give the home field advantage to the higher seeds. I think that's the only way to really keep the ball in the court of the regular season champs and maximizing their
performance.
Performance, right. Yeah. And giving them the advantage.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I do think there are some benefits to a format like this. I think like what Gordo was saying, his point is you should be seeing more attacking soccer because the amount of goals you concede doesn't really matter, right? So like,
but the playoffs aren't attacking soccer, man. Like,
but in general, you're just playing to win the game.
You're playing to win the game, right? We play to win the game. Whoever said Herm Edwards, play to win the game.
For sure.
The playoffs in any sport are tight, contested games. So let's throw that idea out the window that it's going to be attacking, free, fluid soccer, because I don't think it should be. But I do think that here's what I would do if I was a commissioner. I'd take Friday after Thanksgiving and work backwards. And every single year and figure out something else to do in that window, because I understand what the concern is. The concern is they don't want to have a layoff. But now these teams are coming back in the beginning of January. I think MLS teams, if they had stuff to play for, if most of these cities can play in January, February, do something to that degree. Bring them back in, give them a Christmas break, give them a holiday break. Everyone stays on the same 6 weeks, and then do something in those other windows. Have a tournament there. Have a tournament in Arizona or in Florida, or do something to that degree to get rid of this 6-week, 8-week playoff bust that stinks anyway. Like everyone grinds through that. Like that's an antiquated idea. But I think that without all of these MLS Cups are the only thing you know about MLS Cup. The only thing you know about the league playoff structure is that it's the longest in the world. Okay, well, what does that mean? How can anyone really bank on the Super Bowl? Everyone knows when Super Bowl weekend is. Everyone knows when NBA championships are. MLS could own that day and compete with college football, which is what they've always been looking for. They've been looking for something to call their own that they can have a win with. And that's how I would structure it. And then go backwards.
I think it's pretty long and it's pretty drawn out, and it's tough to keep the interest of every MLS fan.
Momentum, man. Yeah. Momentum. They have so much momentum, and now it's, to Gordo's point, it's all over the place.
Well, if they're going to do it this way, the most intriguing thing, and I think we all agree that this Leagues Cup was super exciting. So if you can find a way to replicate that in the playoffs, the good thing about it was it was almost every day was soccer. Okay. And so I've enjoyed that about the MLS is these playoffs, because there's so many freaking games and it is so choppy. I do enjoy that I can go home from whatever I'm doing and I can look and be like, oh, there's a game on. I like that. Yeah. I like that about Leagues Cup, and I like that about the playoff structure. But they got to.
What about a postseason tournament?
No,
what about
right.
you? Yeah. Yes. What about you qualify for the postseason tournament, which looks exactly like Leagues Cup?
Guards. That's what it is.
But then how do you reward the higher seeds?
Right. You still can't do it. That's the biggest problem.
Maybe you host them. You host just like you guys did. Didn't you host a pod? So the higher seeds host the pods, and every game that you play, it gets played in Geodis or
something
it gets
like that.
Wherever.
They can't have. Sorry, Dax. They can't have 8 days between a game. Dax,
no, that's
silly,
I know
you want these teams, and it's more important than Leagues Cup, but they got to shrink the time in between games. Like eight days. That's 24 days essentially. That's going to be the first round. That's a month.
Yeah. I think you keep it really simple. I think you have, if you want to go ahead with this playoff format, let's say they do it for another couple years. You say, we're still going to play on the weekends. And now because the weather in every single market right now is very manageable, you have 3 games on a Saturday, you have 3 games on a Sunday. And if you want to do like a special big game on a Monday, you do that and you just parse it out, right? One kickoff at 2 p.m., one kickoff at 5 p.m., one kickoff at 8 p.m., right? Because then you have soccer throughout the day, right? You're always going to be competing against the college football and the NFL and even the NBA at this time of year. But again, it's just a Monday, Tuesday, 10 days in between games. Like it's hard for I think people to follow it. It's hard to keep momentum. It's hard for the players, right, to continue to go through. Like so maybe you have 5 days in between games, maybe you have 10. So it's just choppy.
Yeah.
Gordo, I like that idea, postseason tournament and reshaping this. You still get the American dream of the playoffs, but you bring in a restructured format because this just doesn't work. It just there's too many holes here. And that what are we at, year 26? Is that where we're at in MLS? And we're still. I mean, I can guarantee you the structure will be different next year. Everybody knows that. That's the only thing that's consistent is they're going to change it next year. They're on to a couple different things, but I think that this one wasn't it, and it'll be interesting. Well, round 2 will be interesting. I think we'll learn from round 2, the games in round 2, and seeing how it kind of shakes out. Last thing I want to touch on. There's obviously a lot of variables that go into a postseason, right? There's a lot for every team. Philly, though, is dealing with an interesting one in these contract negotiations for some of their big time players are now being made public, and the front office has now commented on it. Jim Curtin's been forced, I think, to comment on it. Players are now commenting on it, specifically Ali Bedoya, the team's captain, and Kai Wagner, who's arguably the league's best left back, in not being granted contracts or re-signing. Dax, I want your opinion on this first. How much of that goes into the locker room at this moment in the year? Because it always swirls around the locker room during the regular season, but in a playoff environment, especially with it being made public, what's the significance of what Philly's dealing with?
I think it depends on the player, honestly. I think that if it's a certain type of player that might be making a bigger issue of it, personally, if they're internalizing it, if they're pissed off, if they're not training well, I think it can become a very big issue. But a guy like Ali Bedoya is a model professional, right? And I think this guy's given his heart and soul to Philly. I don't like how the way that they're treating him. I don't think it's deserved. I think first of all, if you're the sporting director, you try your best to keep this under wraps until the offseason, and you say, hey, listen, we're going to revisit your contract situation in the offseason. Like, we want you fully focused on the playoffs. I don't think you go. And what was the Athletic article? They told him it was a 2-minute conversation. Like, hey, listen, we want to get younger. We're not interested in bringing you back. Like, that's crazy. That's criminal to tell a guy like that, if that's how it went down. Am I wrong? Is that what happened, Guards?
Yeah, and I think it was maybe on the training field.
It's crazy to talk to a guy like that in that way, who's given so much for your club. Why don't you just keep it till the offseason? Say, hey, listen, let's revisit this in the offseason. And by the way, if the guy wants to come back and he's willing to take a pay cut, surely there's some sort of common ground you can find there with a player who has still provided your team with, I don't know how many starts he's had this year. Has he played, 25 games this year? Like,
quite a few.
He definitely had some injuries, and that's whatever. That's to be expected. But for me, because it's Ali Bedoya and the type of player he is, he will make sure that it's not an issue in the locker room. I can assure you that it's going to hurt him to not have a contract situation sorted out for next year, but he's not going to let that seep into how he trains and how he plays. He will be fully focused on winning a championship, and that's it. Another type of personality, another type of player who maybe is looking for a raise. Maybe they're not happy with how they're being treated. Maybe this could be a big problem, right? This could infiltrate into the locker room and you could start to see some cracks appear. But I think Bedoya is the type of guy who he will not let that affect him, and he won't let it affect his team.
29 games, 26 starts.
And you mean to tell me that you can't find a role for this guy, either mentoring young players, or you can't find a couple $100,000 on the salary cap to give this guy and say, hey, listen, you're a legend here, and we're not going to do you any favors, but you've earned the right to like see your career out here, where you've made this team successful, right? And I find it really strange. I find it really strange how you can be an executive and just not have the wherewithal to just tell a guy, let's visit this in the offseason after the season's over. What harm could that do? Maybe that'll piss the player off. Who knows? But at least you're not telling him one way or another that you're back or you're not back.
Mm-hmm. Gordo, let's take it one step further. You're Ali Bedoya, and the union come to you after the season and say, hey, we do want to offer you a contract. Are you able to go back into that locker room, to that organization at this point?
After all this has transpired?
Yes.
I mean, it depends on the conversations. I think he would be open to it, depending on how that conversation goes. You know, to Dax's point, it just seems like we're missing something because it's so ridiculous. But ridiculous things like this happen, and people handle things poorly. And I don't understand. I can't say it any different than Dax. I don't understand why they would handle it like this headed into a playoffs and telling a guy absolutely not. And why can't you find a guy like that a role? Why?
Do you know what situation this reminds me of? Totally separate teams.
I was trying to think. Somebody, right?
It reminds you, I know you guys are going to love this. It reminds you of the Greg Berhalter, Gio Reyna World Cup situation. Why would you tell a guy before something is about to happen that he's not going to play that much, or whatever? Like,
that's not what I was thinking, but
it's true though. You're putting something in a player's head that could have a negative effect on his performance or the team's performance. You don't have to go that far.
It seems really bizarre to handle to a guy like that, because obviously the locker room has reacted in favor of Bedoya.
Guys posting on social media.
And so public, right? So to answer your question, Gargs, I think he could, but it all comes down to the conversation. It all comes down to, listen, this was not our intent. I can't even make up words to rebound and dig yourself out of a hole that they've created. The stupid like media fire that they've created on their own behalf. Like, it's so strange, dude. That would be up to him, man.
But I think clearly, not to interrupt you, Gordo, but look at game one. They played great. So I don't think it's really going to affect that locker room, because they're a veteran locker room, and because Bedoya is a top professional.
No, but yeah, like, that's what you said, and you're right. It won't affect him right now because Bedoya won't let it. He's a good captain. But to go back, I think that's his own choice. If it was me, I would be open to it because of one reason and one reason only. He's got deep roots. He's planted himself in Philly. You watch his, he's part of that. He's part of that city. He's part of that culture. He's part of that tradition. I would say, yeah, my kids are in school. This is where we want to be. I'm open to it. If there's some sort of, if there's some sort of conversation where they're admitting that they're stupid, I would make them write that down on a piece of paper. Just admit right here and sign that you're stupid, and I'll come back for any amount.
What is it? What's the movie where it's I think it's Happy Gilmore, where he's like, I'm dumb, you're smart, I'm a loser, you're the best.
Yeah.
You want the sporting director to say that to him?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty good. I was Bob Barker, and Kelly was Happy Gilmore for
I know that was a good costume
for Halloween this past one. It was pretty good.
Golf clap.
What would you do?
At this moment, as the player or as the front office?
As Bedoya.
As Bedoya.
Same question you gave to me. You would stay.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be tough, man. I genuinely believe that it would be tough, but I think what you had just mentioned in terms of the locker room and where they're at, I think that's a strong locker room. Jimmy does an incredible job at building a culture, as we've seen over the past however many years he's been in charge there. And obviously, Ali Bedoya is a massive piece of that cultural fabric that's in the locker room. So Kai Wagner is another one that, that we're talking about, that seemingly either wants to go or maybe wants to go or now maybe wants to stay. And we don't know all the details, right? So there's probably a lot of back and forth and dancing that happens. But Ali specifically, I think at this point in his life, he probably makes a grown man decision and says, this is for my family. This is where I want to be. I'll walk back in there and probably never speak to Ernst ever again after I sign this piece of paper, but I will sign the piece of paper so I can continue to cement my legacy, because it's not a short-term decision, right? At that point, it's a long-term decision. You're making a long-term decision about your career, about your legacy, about 2 moves from now, not just what the way that you want maybe the last year or last 2 years of your career to look like. That's in my mind. So, all right, well, that wraps it up. That wraps our topic list. We got games on tap. We're Friday afternoon right now recording, so hopefully we'll get this out before the playoffs get kicked off again. That all depends on Gordo's technical capabilities and whether he can download a document or not. But this was a good one. We got a lot of good banner. I think we're going to learn a lot from the weekend, and we'll what we need to get? We need to get some opinions on the draft and on some playoff favorites from our fans and from our listeners. So if you guys do have some things to say, if you guys do have some opinions on some of these teams, well, we may have some polls.
Did you book your flight, guards, to Denver?
I'm trying to rope Gordo into a trip to Arizona to MLS Next Fest, which I think is like December 4th or 5th through the 10th.
I'm sure Gordo can fool the Rapids into giving him like a couple grand to go scout.
You would like to think that, but Gordo just said he's not great with words. So
not resourceful.
It might be challenging. Either way, I do owe a couple things. So for now, let's close this one up, and we will see you on the next. Dax, good luck, bud.
Thanks, guys.